All right. Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of Groovin on Life. I'm Scott Lanningham. Those of you who were here last week for our pilot, I do apologize for the audio delay. Elias Haslanger was so gracious to come on and do that first show with me and do a little celebration of Church on Monday's 5th year at the Continental Gallery. I did not keep that episode up because the audio was all over the place. We were talking, the music was roaring, then there was a delay, I'd say, and he'd answer 15 seconds later. It was awkward. So I apologize for all of that, and we will have him back on again to do that again the right way. This week, my guest, I think I did show you his photo earlier, which I need to bring that up. It's a pretty cute little photo there. That's Gerald Stockton. And if you want to see what the real guy looks like, let's just bring him on right now. Gerald, how you doing?
Hamburn, what's going on?
Now, Gerald, I want to do this little intro. Gerald's publicist sent this to me, and I think they're a little pushy, writing all of this ahead of time. But Gerald was born on Mars in the 1950s.
Oh, that is right. And was born in Mumbai too.
Yeah, yes, an extended drought forced his father to move the family to South Africa shortly thereafter.
That is right. What is this?
At age 6, Gerald took up a career as a wedding band frontman, choosing the bass guitar over the guitar because it has fewer strings and they're thicker, making them harder to miss on the downstroke. Am I accurate so far?
Yes, you're very good at what you're saying.
Okay. He eventually moved to the U.S. because he'd heard about the exotic, lush surroundings of Denton, Texas. He attended famed North Texas State University. That name has now been changed to the University of North Texas, in acknowledgement that Texas is not really a state, it's a country. As he later swept the Dallas music scene by storm, he discovered me via a cassette copy of my comedy song, Moose in My House, and he beckoned me to Dallas, where I joined him for 3 years of music-related work that I can only describe as like being paid to ride rides all day long, drink milkshakes, and laugh at everything. That's right, he did beckon me. You know, it was 3 years, honestly, that I must say have forever set the bar of a workplace unreasonably high. And for that, I'll never forgive you, for setting the bar so high for fun and at work. You've ruined the rest of my work experiences after that.
Yes, you blemished my life as well, my friend.
So before we go any farther, I'm checking here to make sure. Okay, Robert Moore has joined, and I did tell him I would share the cow milking story. Robert is a longtime good friend and supporter, and he was one of the first people that when I said, is anybody going to follow the show? Will you be there? And Robert said, I'll be there if you tell the cow milking story. Before we before we start running into this, do you mind if I tell it real quick, Gerald?
Yes, go ahead, because I'm also
okay, let me clear my throat.
Like you to tell.
Let me get some water.
Is that water or something else?
It's water. I'll tell the very short version. My dad decided I need character building, as all fathers do of their sons. And he purchased a Holstein cow when we were living in Colorado in the late 60s, early 70s. And he informed me when I was 12 that I would be milking this cow every morning at 5 o'clock. And we didn't really have a barn. It was kind of an old shed that was made into a barn. And you came through the hole in the side of it, didn't even have a door, so in the winter in Colorado, it was freezing cold. So I'd get, but then, in the summer, it was much nicer, except for the smell. And you'd get in there, and we had a wooden headstall that we'd created that the cow went into. And then on the other side of the headstall was where we kept the hay and the oats, and I had a big oat bucket that the cow would eat out of. And then I would sit on my little stool and with my big milk can and, a 3-gallon silver milk can and milk away. On this one particular morning, there was a hornet's nest that was up in the rafters of the little barn, but we didn't think anything of it. It was like, we don't bother them, they don't bother us, which was not a good plan.
Yes.
So I'm milking this cow one morning really early, and we called her Bossy because every milk cow's called Bossy. And her tail would swing around and smack me every once in a while, or she'd lift her leg and try to kick the bucket, and that's how I knew everything was okay. Well, suddenly she went stiff. The tail was straight as a stick. There wasn't any shaking of flies. There wasn't any kicking. And I looked up, and on the other side of the headstall, in the barn, in the hay over there, was a skunk. And Bossy, maybe he was coming back from his late night prowl or something. But we knew a skunk lived under the barn, but I didn't know he ever came, up into the barn proper. But here he was, and they were having a face-off. He was looking at her, she was looking at him, and I just thought, come on, you know what a skunk is. Don't do anything stupid. And then she just decided to let out a nice hearty moo. Moo! And the skunk did an about face and let fly. And from what I could see, she got hit pretty much straight up the nostrils. And you know how big cows' nostrils are. And she was very unhappy and quickly removed herself from the headstall, taking it apart in the process, breaking the piece of wood on the top. And as I was trying to get out of her way as she backed out, I forgot to mention the hornets, they usually buzzed and hit me on the head like little rocks, and that's how I knew, that they were there but not angry. And she upset them, so I think they must have stung her because she was very unhappy. And as I tried to get up quickly and step backwards to get out of the way, I tipped and dumped all 2.5 gallons of hot milk on my chest. And I just saw her hooves going over me as she was exiting the barn, over me. So, and as I remember, my dad, as I came out of the barn, totally disgusted, he had been driving to work and he had parked and seen some or all of this transpire and was just sitting by his car laughing. So
that's another one of your great epics.
So much for character building.
There's a story that I want you to tell as well that sort of cemented our relationship.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, before we get into that though, that was all me having fun and telling a little bit of reality and a lot of silly stuff in my intro about you. But I want people to know about your great talent and all the cool stuff that you've been doing and are still doing. But before that, I hinted at how we met, and I wonder if you could kind of give your version of how we connected back in like 1990, 91, right around there.
Yeah. Well, I came to America from South Africa in 1979, specifically to study at the University of North Texas. That place, it was so famous around the world. I knew about it in Africa, and I was the first South African to come there. And I went through the program, and when I graduated in '84, I had quite a lot of studio experience growing up in South Africa. And I was an older student. So when I graduated, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, which was to become a studio writer and composer and player. And somehow through people I'd met in gigging, I got hooked up with the famous Tom Merriman at TM Communications in Dallas, which was sort of one of the bigger production companies actually in America, writing commercials and radio IDs and stuff like that. And it was the most brilliant place to work because my boss, Tom Merriman, was a man of great talent and also a great human being, a terrific guy. And it's nice to work for a guy who's actually good at writing music as opposed to some of the people I've worked for.
Oh, he was amazing, and written for all kinds of things, from as small as to as large as you could imagine, right? On all stages.
He became sort of a mentor to me, and during this period, it was a great time in my life. I was sort of new in America, and my life was very things were going on. And so my job was to come to work every day and just write music for commercials, for music for libraries, for radio stations, whatever, and radio IDs. And I got pretty good at it. And during this time, I would get tapes would be sent to me from guys trying to break into the business, and on cassette tapes. And I would, when I first started out, I'd actually take the time to listen to some of these. And very short, I realized that most of these things that would arrive in the mail were total rubbish. And I mean, I could never hire these people as composers, let alone as anything, And at the time, I was also playing in a top 40 group downtown Dallas. And the keyboard player in the group was a wonderfully talented young guy called Dave Catney, who was from Houston. Dave was a supreme talent. He was by far, he was too good for the band. But
beautiful
Dave
pianist,
and I,
just a great pianist, right?
He was a great jazz pianist who achieved some sort of acclaim before his untimely passing, Mm-hmm. Dave and I became very good friends. I just dug this cat, similar to you. So my friend Dave, one day he said to me, I want you to hear this friend of mine who, I think you were living in Houston at the time.
Right.
A friend of mine, his name is Scott Lanningham, and he writes and produces these very interesting pieces of music. And I said to Dave, right, yeah, okay, whatever. And shortly thereafter, I believe Dave had talked you into sending me a cassette of some of your stuff. Well, I remember getting this envelope with your stuff in it, but it lay on my desk for about 6 months because I wasn't interested in opening any more of these stupid, demos. The one day at work, I guess I had nothing to do, and I thought, well, I think Catney called me again and said, have I listened to the stuff by this guy, Scott Lanningham? And I said, actually, I haven't, but why don't I do it? So I tore open the brown envelope. And, I can remember this like it was yesterday. I'm sitting there in my office sort of quietly. And I put this cassette in, and this music started playing, and it was a tune called There's a Moose in My House. And it was so over the top brilliant. Not only the song, but the programming and the singing and the idea and the audio quality and everything. It just sort of blew me away, and I started laughing. And I'll never forget it. It really changed. And so I think I called you, Scott. I think I called you because I had your phone number. And I said, hey, man, are you the cat that wrote There's a Moose in My House? And that was the beginning of a bond, because during the tune, Scott does this crazy scat vocal. That was so brilliant, and it was so refreshingly new, what I was listening to. So to cut a long story short, I said to Scott, we are looking for outside writers, because at the time we were writing so much music, I couldn't do it all. And I invited Scott up to Dallas to write a few cuts, and just as test cuts. And that was the beginning of a friendship. And actually, you moved in and started working for us on a full-time basis.
I did. When you called me, we were still in Houston. I'd just been married barely a year, and we're about to have Nate, our first child. And I had a house gig playing with a band at a club 5-6 nights a week, and we got fired. They said it because the drums were too loud, but we know it was some other reason, I'm sure.
Of course.
Matter of fact, I'm sure it was another reason. But when you called me, man, it was like I was trying to figure out what to do with myself. I was driving for a messenger service. I mean, I was doing anything I could to make some money. And that song, a friend had encouraged me to enter it in a song contest at one of those big morning Zoo FM, drive time shows in Houston, and it won the competition. And that's when Dave Catney, bless his heart, I played a number of gigs with him. Such an enormously talented and sweet soul of a human, and just for him to have pushed that into your hands, I mean, that meant everything, you know? I mean, who knows if I'd ever had the opportunity to meet you or to get into writing all the rest of the tunes that were a part of that project over time, you know? So.
Well, aside from that project, you wrote, I mean, gosh, hundreds of commercials for us as well. I mean, you really got good at it, you know?
You're working with you taught me so much about writing music and about using MIDI and
coincidentally, that was the kind of the beginning of the MIDI thing, you know, and I was quite good at it. And the reason that I was good at it is because I had been a drummer as well as
I didn't know that.
So that is why my tracks had a sort of a relatively good rhythm track on the bottom, because I knew what a drummer should do, as opposed to most cats who program and don't know really how to work a drum set, you know. But anyway, proceed. Let's go back to Moose in My House, because that was.
You know what? I'm wondering if we should just to refresh people that haven't heard it in a while. I wonder if we should play a little bit of it. Are you okay with that?
I'd love to hear it again as well.
You know, and before we do that, I've just realized someone has alerted me to the strange framing of my shot here, and this item right above my head, which was a light fixture in the Moody Theater in Austin, the ACL Moody Theater. I'm going to have to come up with a different backdrop or a different angle, but for now, just consider this a sign that I'm thinking really hard.
It's a self-destruct button.
No, this is my thing about it. This is the self-destruct. No, this button right here is the self-destruct. And this one, if you want me to stop talking and let Gerald talk more, just press this one on your Facebook Live screen. Right. Okay, let's play just a little bit of Moose in My House, and we'll see if people can hear this. Hold on a second.
Major problem here. Moose in my house. What am I going to tell my dog? I checked my mail and found a box from the Sierra Club. I ran into the bathroom and found Moose here in my tub. My bill from Bell had phone calls to the Yukon and Montana. My toothbrush smells like moose breath. I'm missing my pajamas. There's a moose in my house. I don't know what to do. There's a moose in my house. I stepped in moosey poo. There's a moose in my house. My dog is turning blue. Moose in my house.
Oh, here's the line. Okay, that's enough of that.
That's awesome. But you consequently did a whole album of those tunes.
Well, when I came to we moved to Amarillo briefly, and then we ended up in Dallas. And with your encouragement and Pat Hogan's encouragement, and I was able to come and join what then became MPT, Merriman Patrick Turner Productions, right? And you guys took me on as a staff writer, which was a huge, risky, bold move on your part for an untried individual like me. And I wrote, 30, 40 library tracks a month or something like that for you guys.
We did a huge amount. That's where I got my writing chops from, because I wrote so much music as well that people will say to me, you know, as a composer, do you ever get a writer's block? And I said no, because I've written so much that I've developed a way of, you know, even when I do get into a corner, I can get out of it quickly, because when you work under those conditions, you're working under pressure. You have to get the gig done. So, and you experienced the same thing. I mean, we wrote.
Well, and that's true. And the comedy part of it, that's where Monkey Motel came from, and Hairdo Blues, and A Fishtail, and Hijack, and Big Humor Beat, and Shut Up and Dance, and so that period was that was a wonderful creative period, and a tremendous opportunity to be around you guys and learn from you.
Well, you know, you sort of downplay yourself a little, because myself and the other co-writer who was there, Bud Gewen, a great guitar player.
Yeah.
He was also writing sort of like you, not on staff, but employed by us on a part-time basis. And Bud was a great writer, and him and I would get together and actually secretly quite jealous of you, because you had a way of programming the drum set that was quite unique. Like you'd have the hi-hat in stereo going across from the left speaker to the right with different hits on the hi-hat. And Bud and I were so impressed, and we secretly hated you, you know.
Well, I was so glad to be around you guys because you helped me figure out, you know, what the white keys sounded like versus the black keys, you know. I mean, I wasn't sure exactly how you put them together and what combination. I thought you could just mash any group of them down and whatever came out was going to be fine.
I remember
you helped me
trying to
make more
explain
sense of all that.
What an inversion was, a chord inversion. And to this day, you don't get that. You just somehow do it.
Yeah. No, I don't get it. Yeah. Now, there's a number of things we could do here. I know one of the things that I want to do, though, is turn the attention away. It's been a lot about Scott, and I want to talk about you and your writing because you were cranking out tracks. I mean, I wish I could take people back to the studio that was just up the street from Mary Kay's headquarters. Remember that? I mean, and some little gym down the street where, you know, at fancy Four Seasons Hotel or something.
On Regal Row.
Regal Row. And it was a big studio, and there were a couple of different cutting rooms, maybe three, and the big one you could get an orchestra.
3 studios.
Right? Yeah.
3 studios.
And you know, I did the 32-track Mitsubishi, you know, recorder in the big main room with a big console and a bunch of good staff engineers, and it was this machine of cranking out music. And Gerald would be down the hall, and you could hear it come out. Yeah.
We had a singing group in there, basically around the clock, 5 days a week.
Right, including some people. Then, you know, at least people from those years would know some of these singers. Eric Tagg was one of the singers, right? He had a hit during the 80s.
Right.
Benita Arterberry, who was a pretty cool soul singer. I've lost touch with her, but she was terrific.
Abby Holmes, who was terrific. Kay Sharp.
And your lovely wife, who departed us so sadly, but I remember her beautiful voice. And man, it was just this terrific group of singers. And at your encouragement, I got them to sing on background on a bunch of my songs, which was the biggest thrill. Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to say to people, you know, we can't play music from that time necessarily. We don't have it on us, but Gerald has been at it over the years and continues to write for film and television and advertising and also just to put out recordings of his own material. We've got a couple of things that we want to share of yours, Gerald. Tell them about what the Doppler Effect is and what that comes from.
I went through a rather dark patch living in Dallas when my wife died, and I really had a mental problem. During that time, I met a wonderful human being, a lady that I had known in South Africa. She was a singer, and she found me on Facebook, I think, or I found her. I can't remember. She was living in Orlando at the time, and we had known each other in Johannesburg. We had worked together on recording sessions. She's a singer, and she reached out to me, and one thing led to another, and we became an item. And she really saved my life. And so I then moved to Orlando. And during this period of recovery, I started writing my own material. So I produced an album of my own stuff, which I'd written all this music all my life and never anything of my own. So I did that album. It's called My Gentle Breeze. It's available on CD Baby. And then I decided to write another because I was suddenly feeling very artistic and creative. And I wrote a second CD, which I've just released, called A New Dawn. Is that in the camera? And then I called it A New Dawn because it reflected my sort of coming back, my recovery.
Yeah, sure.
Thanks to Avril, I'm back, so to speak. And so the CDs I've had some wonderful musicians play on both of my CDs, guys like Dan Hurley, Pete Brewer, Mike Waldrop, just an incredible amount of
Wow.
great musicians contributed to both my CDs, which is why they sound good. I mean, I've had these great, awesome players. So I wrote this cut called Doppler Effect. Originally, I wrote it for a big band, and then I reduced it for my album for 3 horns and rhythm section. And it's kind of a contemporary jazz sounding piece.
Let's play a little bit of it, and I've got to say again, Gerald, I knew some of what you were going through. Nothing like, you know, if I had been there near you and had been at your side when it was happening. But I'm so grateful for your return to full Gerald status because I love you and because there's so many things about you that I need to know are alive and well in the world.
We'll talk about my background after this. And
okay. So anyway, Doppler Effect is what this one's called?
Yeah. Why don't you start it? Well, maybe from the middle out.
Okay, let me see. I don't know. I'm still learning about how to use the software. Sometimes it's in a loop, sometimes it's not. I think this will start from the top, but let's take a listen.
Well, it's just a very intricate. I started this with, I wrote the bass line and then first, which is very tricky, very intricate, and then added these horns above it, and it gets a salsa groove towards the end. And my friend Steve Wiest, my great friend Steve Wiest, is playing this awesome trombone solo.
Are we quite a ways away from the trombone solo?
No, it's coming up.
Let's let it play. Let's turn it back up here a little bit. That's awesome.
That's my man, Steve.
Steve. Now, where do you know Steve from? Is he a Denton guy?
Actually, yeah. Steve is also playing quite a large part of my life at the moment. He also went to North Texas years after I went there. But Steve's got quite a intense background. He's originally from Mississippi. You know, grew up as a good old boy. But he didn't fit into that mold. And then great trombone player, and he toured with Maynard Ferguson for many years.
You know, trombone players have a very hard time fitting into the good old boy thing because you usually need a banjo or a guitar to fit into that.
Absolutely, yeah.
They're not. I haven't seen a lot of trombone players in the good old boy music network.
Well, you know, I think Tom Malone from the Blues Brothers and the Letterman show, I think he also is from Mississippi.
Really?
So, yeah. So anyway, going back to Steve. I met Steve a while back when he had become the director of the 1 O'Clock Lab Band at North Texas. So I immediately was attracted to to Steve's awesome abilities. And so this leads actually quite nicely into a project that I'm
what a
currently
player.
involved with.
Yeah, so talk about this new one. I mean, it's Vinyl Hamden is the name of the band, or?
Correct. Steve put together, Steve and I, we're like two gay guys coming out of we're in the closet. And the reason I say that is we both love our jazz and our bebop and that, but we are closet lovers of the band Chicago. You see, now this doesn't go too well with the heavy jazz cats, so we've got to keep it quietly to ourselves. So
I love that band too. I was listening to them the other day, revisiting Chicago 8 and
oh man. Well, you know, when I was still in high school in South Africa, that's when I started digging Chicago. The thing is, Jimmy Pankow, the trombone player with the band, is so awesome. And Steve and I have had the secret crush on Jimmy Pankow. We're actually, you know, we actually really like him and possibly love him, you know. So Steve has always wanted to put together a horn band along those lines. And he spoke to me about this a long time ago. And finally, he put this project together, which is really awesome. And it's brand new. And it's a band called Vinyl Hamden. I'm the bass player in the group. The group has got such awesome luminaries in the band. Steve is on trombone and does all the writing. Awesome stuff. Our vocalist is Lisa Dodd-Watts from Canada. Frank David Green is the lead trumpet player, and you'll know Frank from the Letterman Band.
Okay.
Lead trumpet player of the Letterman.
Cool.
And Frank is a big-time studio player in New York and all over. Ray Herman is playing tenor, and Ray is the new sax player with Chicago, funny enough. When I say new, he's been with Chicago for at least 10 years.
Right.
He replaced Walt, the original sax player. So, I mean, wow, for me to be hanging out with these cats is awesome.
Wow.
The drummer is another Stockton Helbing from the University of North Texas. And he also tours with Doc Severinsen.
Terrific.
Art Buton from Denver in baritone. Ryan Davidson on guitar, also 1 o'clock, X1 o'clock, North Texas. Eric Gunnison on keys. I think that's everybody. Myself on bass, and it's all recorded and mixed by Phil Buller, a brilliant mixing engineer. And we just released an album, actually, called Vinyl Hamden Red.
I like
and
that
it's
cover.
available on CD Baby. So
what a great band, man. You gave me a cut. You call it The Road. What's it? I only have part of The Road is my middle name. Right? Yeah. Is this one of your tracks for the band?
No. I think this was a track by that. What was her name? That brilliant rock funky guitar player, singer chick. People will know this tune. It's a cover.
She's a rock funky guitar player, singer chick.
With red hair.
You got to say that 3 times real fast. No, we better not. It might not remain a family-friendly show. But
that's right.
Okay, I'm going to play this cut, and I'm going to drop myself off the screen just for a few minutes while it's playing to grab something, and then I'll be right back. But you sit here and dig on it, and I'll be back in just 30 seconds, okay?
All right.
Like
It's a great band. It's a great band. I'm very honored to be part of this.
Man, the strength of that band from the horn section through the rhythm section all across, it's super tight. And I'll bet
Great arrangements. Steve's a genius at that stuff.
Who else is writing for it? Is it you and Steve, or are you just playing in this band right now?
At this point, it's all Steve because it's his baby. He has said that at some point, as we become richer and richer, with the intention of becoming very rich, billions and billions of dollars, that kind of thing, which is what we expect because we're in the music business.
Yes, and instrumental music is pretty notorious for, that's really where most of the world's billionaires come from now is selling records, right?
Well, I mean, you and I both drive Ferraris from our jingle days, right?
Well, mine right now it's up on blocks out front, and the kids are using it for a sandbox, but because
you're so rich. No, at this point, Steve's the only writer in the band, but we will all contribute as this thing, sort of grooves along.
Well, that's an awesome sound, and I want to hear more of it. I want to get a copy of that and get a copy of your new CD, because I know we'll want to come back on and play some more of this stuff and just have listening parties.
I guess the way I got to America in the music industry is I grew up. My father is still alive and is a musician and was quite a well-known musician in South Africa. So I sort of grew up in the business, and at one point in my life, he was the director of a wind band, like a military wind band. So I used to come home from school, and he'd be sitting at the table writing a chart, wind band chart or a big band chart. And that's when I became interested in writing. And I remember one day I asked him, I guess I was about 13 or 14, how do you do that? And he said, he brought out a piece of score sheet paper and he said, all right, my dad was off to a gig. He said, write the head for alto and trumpet of an old standard. I think, what was it that I did? Some Latin tune. And it took me about 10 hours to write about 8 bars, put it on the paper, I had no idea. And when he came back that day, he showed me that I had the rhythmic groupings all wrong and stuff like that. But in that one lesson, I learned so much about just putting stuff down on the page. And that became an interest to me. And then when I graduated from high school, all the young guys in South Africa at the time had to do a mandatory a year or two in the military. Mm-hmm. And I got into the Army band and spent 2 years working sort of with a jazz band. And that's when I started writing a lot of big band charts.
Wow.
And by the time I got to North Texas, even though I was an older student, I had a lot of experience, which helped me greatly, in living out my dream of becoming a full-time composer, and player.
How did you know about North Texas? And those checking into the broadcast, I'm sure most of you know what University of North Texas is all about, which is one of the great music schools in the world and has produced so many great instrumentalists and singers and all kinds of people over the years, both jazz and in other genres. The list is too long to even begin to name, but some of the people Gerald's mentioned already, and Gerald himself. But how did you know about it all the way down there in South Africa? Did your dad know about it?
When I was coming up in high school, a lot of the guys slightly older than me, the local jazz musicians or rock guys, whenever they went to America, they'd always go to Berkeley in Boston, because you've been there. And my dad, who was a deeper musician, he was aware of the program at North Texas and Leon Breeden, who started that program.
Right.
So my dad said to me, you really need to go somewhere that is considered a little more serious. And he talked me into going to University of North Texas, which I'm very pleased that I did that, because the people that have been to North Texas, they're ubiquitous in the sense that I can go to any town in America and I'll meet somebody who went there. For example, when I moved to Orlando 4 years ago, it took me all of a few phone calls, and I started working, because a bunch of friends I had gone to school with at the University of North Texas were down here. So getting in was easy, you know. And there's so many graduates or people who'd been there.
And
so it was a good move for me.
And you were had there ever been another bass player before you that was primary electric player? I mean, I know it's usually an acoustic or back and forth in that band. Didn't you tell me you were the first guy one of the first guys that just was electric?
What happened was the standard was for the top three bands, the 3 o'clock, the 2 o'clock, and the 1, you had to play both upright and electric. Well, I never played upright because I had played many instruments as a child. I played drums, keyboards, electric bass, and trombone as well. So when I came to North Texas, I originally came in as a trombone player, but unfortunately, I couldn't cut it at all. My chops were nowhere even close. So I defaulted to bass.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Now, when the year I got into the 1 o'clock was almost by mistake, because Neil Slater was his first year taking over from Leon Breeden. And I had been playing, I think, in the 3 o'clock. They somehow got into that. And people liked my style of playing. When we did the auditions for the 1, Neil Slater chose me. There was quite a lot of controversy about it. It caused quite a lot of angst amongst the other players because, I mean, how dare he? But I think Neil said that he said that I swung better. That was the way he explained it. So, yes, I was the first guy to get in playing only electric. And, I mean, gosh, what an honor, you know.
That's very cool. I mean, that's like having the NCAA title for the most football wins or something, you know? You'll be forever in the history books at North Texas.
When I got in the 1 was they were running a program at North Texas which brought in visiting artists. All these great musicians would come and do a lecture series. And Michael Brecker came into town, and I was chosen to play the concert with Michael.
Wow. So
you can see me doing that on YouTube. If you look at Michael Brecker at UNT, you'll see me and my another South African friend, Kendall Kay, playing drums.
Oh, that's true. I've never seen that. I have got to check that out. Michael Brecker, what a legend.
That was about the biggest kick in my life, you know. It was the biggest kick.
What was it? What was it like playing behind him that made it feel different from other players you'd been playing behind? Just in a nutshell, what was the feeling?
Very good question. I describe it because I very seldom say this about my own playing, because, you know, I actually played well. And the reason I did is because of him. He had this way, you just felt relaxed, and he was so in command of where the time was that it just took off. And the rhythm, I mean, as a rhythm section, it actually swung. And it's actually one of the most watched things on YouTube with Michael Brecker, because we just played standards and there was no rehearsal. We just let it go, and it just happened. But you know, I've told people, when you play with people of that caliber, it brings out something in your own playing. It's just a relaxedness, and I just went for it, and
yeah,
I'm pretty pleased with the way it sounds, you know. And the recording is not too bad either. So
I know exactly what you mean. You know, the I'm thinking of an example where I wasn't playing and somebody else sat in, but Elias Haslanger, the great saxophonist in Austin that I work with in the Church on Monday band, and we often play together in his quintet on second Friday, I think it is, of every month at the Elephant Room in Austin. For those of you listening that haven't heard it, you should come by and check it out. I think this month, in October, I think we're going to be there on the 20th, which is the third Friday of the month. But anyway, one night we're playing, and I can't remember why he was in town, but Jeff Tane Watts the great drummer that's played with Wynton Marsalis and his own band and Branford and so many over the years, so many people. Jeff was in the audience, and I saw him, and Eli saw him, and on the break I said, "Will you come up and play a tune or two? We'd all love to hear you, you know." And he sat in and played Contemplation, you know, from John Coltrane. You know, that's where we all know that from. And the way he flowed and this controlled almost violence, this rolling thunder, this Elvin Jones thing, you know, that every jazz drummer wants to tap into that on some level. And, you know, and I certainly try in my own way, but to watch Jeff do that and to play it so effortlessly, and the way it just flowed out of the very fiber of his being, and the way, like you said, total command of time. It's a beautiful thing to either be a part of or just to behold and be in its presence, isn't it?
You know, I remember one of the things my dad pushed on me as a child, as a little guy. When I grew up in a small town in South Africa, I was not, because of my dad's obsession with Oscar Peterson and those cats, I never listened to any rock and roll. I was into this jazz shit as a kid, you know. So I would have these get-togethers with friends. You know, we'd have these little parties in high school, and everybody would have a party at the house, and they'd play the usual pop stuff that was going on. And then I held a party at my house, and I think I had Ella Fitzgerald and Count Basie, and the party lasted all of about 10 minutes. Everybody went off. But so I was obsessed with the straight ahead stuff, and my dad used to say to me, you know, what is swing? What is it about? It's that sense of time that like if you listen to Oscar and that original trio with Ed Thigpen and Ray Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that element of time. It's that ting, 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 ting. You know, you've got to analyze where does that sit. That is why you can't program a computer to swing. You can do it. You can do straight eights, but and he impressed that upon me as a child. And you know, when I play, I think about that. Where is that center of the pulse? You know, and it does shift. It shifts, but there's that intensity of the groove that a lot of cats don't have that. But my father drummed that into me as a boy, you know.
Yeah. And
it always stayed with me, that concept of, and then also the ting, getting, is it a dotted 8/16th or is it a triplet? Ting. What is it? Where does that thing lie? And that is why you can't program a computer to do that. You know, there's that human factor. And so when I play, say, a straight ahead, even on the electric, people say I play it like an upright player. I'm always sort of on top of the beat. The problem with that is if you play with a drummer and they tend to come along, then it goes to hell in a handbasket. Because I'm slightly ahead of the beat. The drummer has to sit exactly where he is. And sometimes I'll play a gig and I'll be doing what I do, and the thing starts picking up speed like a raving juggernaut, you know. And I think, no, hold that groove, you know. But,
and people don't, and it's an interesting thing to think about. Drummers and bass players are totally into this, but a note, you know, has some width to it, right? So, and that quarter note in the beat, you can play on different parts of that note. You can land on different parts of that note. And different drummers and bass player combinations have achieved swing in different ways over time. You know, and there are the bass players that lay right in the middle, and then drummers that kind of float over the top of it and they're not as much about establishing the time. The bass player's really laying down the time, and the drummer is commenting on all the time, you know, in a sense, or floating over it. And then there are more traditional swing settings, especially when you're really driving something where the drummer is just right dead center on the beat, and like you said, the bass player can be front or back or wherever. And then it's being aware enough at all times to make whatever adjustments are needed to continue to reestablish that perfect pocket, because things do change, right? And people will move around sometimes. And
when I used to do a lot of,
though, isn't it?
When I did a lot of studio stuff in Dallas, when we did live rhythm sections, my favorite drummer was a young guy called Dan Wojciechowski.
Oh,
And
great
Dan,
player, yeah.
His time was so on. You'd hear the click, the count off click, and we'd start playing, and then you'd never hear that click again because he was so locked in, and that the click would just line up with his snare and bass drum. And I just loved that, you know.
Yeah.
That click would disappear, boy, because we were so tight, and it was really great stuff, you know.
I remember listening to you all in the studio, really loving his playing. Who did he go on? He went to play with a big country pop star. Who's he? And then others.
Yeah, I think he now tours with Peter Frampton, but he did the Australian lady pop singer from Greece.
Are we showing? We're showing our age right now, aren't we?
And he also did for many years the young girl from Texas. Man, come on, listen to us. We don't know.
Yeah, she's good. You'd know her name. She's big. Just trust us.
How embarrassing. but anyway,
Yeah.
but talking about those days at TM, which is where you and our relationship grew, there's a great story that I like to tell. An incident that occurred that forever shaped my life in a rather brutal and rancid, festering way.
Okay, here comes what we know the G-Man for. Let go with it. Let's have this story.
Well, this is a well-known story. It's my friends have all heard this one. During this period, there was a guy renting an office at the TM facility. His name was Marty Perlman, and he was a photographer, but he was also a bodybuilder. He had the business, and he looked at me one day and he said, "Man, you're really out of shape. You need to go get healthy." And I said, "Well, okay, what do I do?" He was a member of the Veranda Club, which was behind that big hotel.
The big fancy workout gym with a basketball court and the whole thing and a swimming pool. Yeah, I went for a while too. Yeah.
He talked me into joining this health club, and so we would go down there, I think 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at lunchtime, and we joined this men's aerobics course, just guys, and it involved us, running, jump rope, doing aerobic stuff for an hour. And all these guys were young, much younger than myself, and they were in great shape. But I thought, okay, this is great. I mean, feels good. And there was this young Texas beauty who ran the course. There was all these guys and this lovely lady. Her name was Becky, and I sort of grew quite fond of Becky. And I used to think, well, maybe it's my accent. It will attract her to me. You see, the problem is she did get attracted to me, but in a way that I had not foreseen. It was an event that sort of cemented our relationship, but in a very startling and deviant and festering, horrific way. So one day we arrive at the club, and instead of being outdoors, she had us all inside the gym, and she had put out these mats and set up various exercise stations, which we would rotate every 5 or 10 minutes. There was a push-up mat, and then a sit-up mat, and then there was a dumbbell. There was a punching bag and various other routines, and every few minutes we'd all rotate to the next station.
You would roll. They would rotate. You would roll, right? I can see you rolling from station to station, right?
I would roll. I would sidle. I would sidle to the next. And there was also in the corner a pull-up bar. Now, bearing in mind that since I'd come to America, my center of gravity has changed somewhat. Yeah. Let's just say I'm no longer the skinny boy that arrives here. So finally, all these young cats, they get to the pull-up bar and they grab hold and so finally it's my turn to get to the pull-up bar. So I approach the apparatus gingerly, sort of like a man going to the guillotine, I was looking around for the lunette and I didn't want to go there. So Becky says, come on, G-Man, your turn. So I hop up, and I grab hold of the crossbar. And she says, all right, up you go. So I start pulling myself, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not moving up at all, not an inch, nothing. But there's straining and beads of sweat now forming and veins popping.
Veins popping, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now the other members of the group, the guys have stopped doing what they're doing and they're watching. So Becky says, okay, I realize, okay, not a problem, G-Man. So she comes behind me and she says, fold your legs back at the knee and cross your ankles. So
she stood behind you. That was a fateful move. Yeah.
So she cups her hands and puts them around my ankles and starts helping me. And slowly, I start going up, but I'm still straining like a bull about to, his manhood about to be vanquished. And I'm slowly going up, and as my bum gets level with her face, now her face is in point blank range, as I described, there was an uncontrolled muscle release, as I like to call it, a blast from the boilers. And there was this sound, this flapping skin and horror and festering stench of last night's chicken and chops right into her face. Well, my horror was complete. I couldn't believe it because these were muscles I didn't know would also be under a lot of strain. There was this moment of silence, and at which point I realized what had happened. And I let go, and I crouched into the fetal position and scuttled my way out of that gym, never to return. And I often wonder how Becky tells that story. She was on the receiving end.
Becky was rushed to Dallas General and was being treated for third-degree burns.
I think she may have left the club, but I never went back. That's for sure.
Oh, that would be enough to. That would be enough to shut it down for me too, I think, and
in fact, I think the whole thing was shut down after that. In those exterminators.
I think the Veranda Club went into Chapter 11 because nobody would join anymore. I belonged to that club briefly, and it never quite worked out for me. But that story, every time you tell that story, it just makes me, I tear it up. You could see it looks like people probably worrying on watching this that, something sad has happened. But no, these are tears of joy. You tell those stories so well, too. Those are terrific.
I've throughout my career, I've had issues with my exhaust pipe. It's been an ongoing thing with me.
Well, and to guys who are perpetually young guys, grade school boys, which and down deep we still are. There's nothing funnier than the unannounced, unintended, and inappropriate timed, flatulence. And it's
fantastic.
And that's why they keep putting this into films. It's funny. They don't execute it so well in film, though. Sometimes they just throw it in, and you're going, "Oh, that was a random." That you didn't think about. There wasn't the proper buildup or delivery or setting. You can't just throw these in randomly. They don't work when you do that.
We're too polite. You need to get the rancid, festering fart that we remember as kids.
Hey, I want to talk because you're saying this. And I know I think we've been on for about an hour and 5 minutes. So we probably should wrap up soon and then come back so people will want to see the coming second, third, fourth, and fifth edition of Scott and Gerald because we have so much to cover. We can't do it in one show. But I wanted to end with a couple of quick things. One was during that time we worked together at MPT, we used to go and have these milkshake lunches at Denny's. At Denny's, right? And what was your favorite dish? It was moon over
Miami.
Moon over Miami. Yeah, it was a cheese and ham sandwich, right?
Yeah, that's
you
right.
would have a moon over Miami. We would have whatever they called those shakes that were the size of a water trough in a feed yard.
Oh, they were great. And
then we would tell jokes. And I would tell this joke that Gerald absolutely loved. And I learned it from Mark Brown, a really great guy, a mutual friend through Robert Moore, who was watching earlier. And I just love them both. I haven't seen Mark in years, but I'll never forget when he told this terrific joke. Do you want me to tell the joke very briefly?
Well, yes, because this joke is synonymous with our relationship. Whenever I call Scott or talk to Scott on the internet, I insist on the joke.
Yeah.
Because Scott, the joke keeps building. He embellishes it more and more. So the joke it's always funny. And I'll never forget the punchline, which I didn't see coming. And to this day, when I think of Scott Lanningham, I think of the joke. So yes, indeed.
And when he says I have to tell it every time, he's serious. And because of Gerald and the insistence upon me telling this joke, my wife now hates this joke because she's heard it 10,000 times. So
well, it got so bad that I would call Lanningham in the middle of the night to say, "Just give me the punchline. I just want the punchline." That's what it was.
Exactly. But anyway, with all that build-up, it's going to be horribly anticlimactic. But the joke goes like this. There's a guy with a very fast car. He spent a lot of money on this car. He thinks he's cool. It's making him feel quite special. You know, I don't know what it is. You know, it's Bugatti Veyron or something. Anyway, he's cruising down the street and he pulls into a U-Totem or a 7-Eleven or a Piggly Wiggly or one of those little stores, right? And he's sitting there looking cool behind the glass, styling, got his arm up on the wheel, hoping the chicks dig him as they're walking by, you know. And this guy pulls up on a moped next to him, just, you know, a little Yamaha hopper sitting right there. And he notices him kind of, and this guy looks over at the car, and he gets off his moped and he puts his hands right on the hood of the car and stares through the glass, trying to see inside. And you can tell the guy inside is fuming. He's just like, "Get off my car, man. Get off. I'm trying to be hip here. Get your Yamaha hopper hands off my hood." Well, then the kid opens the door and says, "Hey, man, this is a beautiful car." And he says, "Get out." And then the kid gets inside, sits down, and says, "This is fabulous. Could I go for a ride?" Well, the guy, Mr. Cool, is just beyond himself at this point. So he shoves the kid out of the door as he simultaneously slams the passenger door, throws it into reverse, burns into the street, and takes off down Main Street there, going 70, 80 miles an hour in first gear. Just fuming inside. I can't believe that guy just did that. I can't believe he violated my sanctum, my hipness world here, and put his ugly muck into my car, you know. Well, he looks in the rearview mirror and he sees something he doesn't understand. There's a speck approaching from the distance, and it's approaching rapidly. And as it gets close enough for him to make out what it is, it's the kid on his moped, smoking past him, just burns past him, you know, leaving smoke. And then a couple of minutes later, and maybe it wasn't even a couple of minutes, just, you know, seconds later, he's back the other way. And the guy was, "What was that all about? How did that guy pass me on that thing?" He said, "I'll show him." Shifts into second gear. He's got it up to 120 by now. He's thinking, there's no way this is going to be a problem. He looks in the mirror. Here he comes again. One way, back the other way, just smoking him. This time with more speed. He's like, "Oh my God, what is under the hood of that thing?" It's okay. I'm in the car that will take down anybody. He shifts a couple of gears up ahead of that. He's getting on the outskirts of town now. It's probably Vegas or someplace where there's a lot of open straight road and, you know, nothing to hit on the sides. And he's up to, I don't know, 250 by now as he's shifting through his gearbox. Looks in the rearview mirror, pretty confident he's not going to see this guy anymore. Suddenly, here he comes. Oh my God. Now there's fire coming off the front of his moped. And as he goes past him, it's just like thunder. It rocks his car down the road. 45 seconds later, back the other way. He's like, I don't know. He loses it. He shifts all the way into 7th or 8th gear. He's way, way up there. I mean, he's probably hitting 300 by now. It's been about 5 minutes. He hasn't seen the guy. looks in the mirror. Here comes a shining, bright point of light from far off in the background. As it comes past him, it breaks the sound barrier. It almost knocks his car off into the ditch. He doesn't even see what it is. He thinks, that must have been a low-flying military jet. I don't know what that was. 2 minutes later, it comes back the other direction, and as it's passing him, he sees the flapping cheeks of the kid on the moped, hair burned off, flying back the other way. Well, he's completely devastated, so he pulls over to the side of the road. It takes him 4 or 5 minutes to slow down. And he's a broken man. He's in tears, streaming down his face. He paid like $300,000 for this car or something, right? And a guy on a Yamaha just destroyed him. Horsepower 13. So he pulls over, and a couple of minutes later, the kid comes up rattling with pieces falling off of his moped. The tires are gone. It's just metal. And his clothes are shredded. He's got windburn on his face. Most of his hair has been removed. And he comes up and he just crashes against the side of the guy's car. And the guy who's devastated by the speed doesn't even care anymore. And he said, "What in the hell are you riding on? What is in that thing that you were able to do that to me?" And the kid just says, "Man, my suspenders got caught in your door." There you go. There's a joke.
It takes me right back to that day at Denny's. So funny.
Right back to Denny's. And I remember that time at Denny's. I think Gerald had chocolate milkshake coming out of his nose. And there may have been a blast from the boiler.
Gag. Every time you tell it, it gets better, man. And I know the ending, you know.
You know what? There were some other things I wanted to do. I think we should come back and do another one because I worked with Gerald on a project called Bad Street USA. It was a kind of a fun mockumentary about the wrestling world and a certain show, and he wrote some music for it, and I ended up singing a tune. Although we could play that as the outgoing piece of music if you think that would be fun.
Before, I'd like to just, mention my website. If
yes. Oh, my apologies. We've got to do some promotion first. Where do we go to check out Gerald's stuff?
Funny enough, it's under GeraldStocktonMusic.com. So there's a lot of my music posted there.
How did you come up with that title?
Well, I listened to The Joke originally. You started with The Joke, and I was going to do Suspenders.com, but I decided on going back to something that might find me.
GeraldStocktonMusic.com. GeraldStockton.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of my music and stuff on there.
Music.com. I should have had a link set up to show on screen, and I didn't. My bad. There's one more lesson for me to learn for next time. I'm going to put that in some notes around this, and I'm going to start posting these after the fact recordings. I'm going to post them on my Facebook, my YouTube channel, and I'm going to surface them on my Patreon page. And I want to encourage people to check that out, which is patreon.com/groovinonlife. Patreon spelled patreon.com/groovinonlife. There's no G in groovin. You say grooving, it's no longer hip. It's groovin on life. Right. And my blog is scottlanningham.com. I'm going to post this episode, and I'll put some notes about how to go find Gerald's website and get your hands on his CDs and all of that kind of stuff and follow what he's doing. Thank you for bringing the thunder, bringing the G-Stock brilliance, your humor, your sweetness, your great music. You're a treasure, my friend.
Love you, man.
Love you too.